So our final speaker this evening is Betty. Is it Adamou?
It is Adamou. Yeah, you pronounced it right. Thank you.
Well, I'm good with tricky surnames.
You'd be surprised that I get Adams and Adamo a lot.
Right,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah. Who has braved the optimistically named Greater Anglia train service to come and be with us this evening. So we're very, very grateful. Over to Betty. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here. Like the low light. So. This presentation is all about how games and data are changing the world. So that's very bold, but how that will affect us all. So there's only a couple of people in this room that know who I am. For those of you who don't, I will explain. So I'm the founder of a company called Research Through Gaming that's about 9 years old now, and we specialise in making games for research. So hands up anybody who's taken part in a survey. Hands up how many of you found them either boring or tedious or something else. Yep. Oh, yep. A few people that didn't put their hand up as well. I want to talk to you. So I make them into engaging games, and obviously when people are more engaged, they're going to be more focused and attentive, and all sorts of other benefits that I'll go through with you in a moment. And I've also written a book, which I'm going to shamelessly plug here, called Games and Gamification in Market Research. So if any of you are out for a super niche market research book, please do go to any good bookstore and buy it. But the reason I mention my book is not just for a shameless plug, but it is because there is no way you can study the areas of games and do what I do without understanding how games are being utilised in literally every industry on the planet. And as such, because my work is at this intersection of games and engagement and data, which I find incredibly exciting, that means that my business is going from research games, which I invented as a methodology about 10 years ago, to training games and marketing games. Again, it's that intersection of people needing engagement, data, and using games because they're really engaging. And those are two fundamental truths, right? Businesses all around the world have this insatiable desire for engagement, more engagement with our employees, more engagement with our consumers, more engagement with our students. And at the same time, so many businesses are demanding more and more data because that helps them understand their employees better, their students better, their consumers better, and then use that data to make different business decisions in the future, or improve their education services, or improve their training services, and so on. And so I think, and I know, that games are the answer, because of course games cannot exist without data, and games are the most engaging medium of all time. So we're going to break that down. Now, of course, in training and in education and in market research and lots of other industries, people rely on extrinsic motivators to get people to do a thing. Okay, so take part in this market research survey. We'll give you 50p for half an hour of your time and loads of data. Or take part in this training program and you will get a certificate at the end. Or do your full-time job and we'll pay you at the end. It doesn't matter what the extrinsic motivator is. It doesn't necessarily mean the human being doing that task is always going to be as engaged as you would like them to be. And so we see it in the commercial world that extrinsic motivators are not always foolproof, and tons of academic studies show that as well. Now, games, on the other hand, are what we call intrinsically engaging, and anybody who's not overly familiar with the term intrinsic engagement, I'm sure you are, it's just basically doing something for the sheer joy of doing it. Nobody's asked you, nobody's paying you, you're doing it for the joy of doing it. And I'm so glad that Dom spoke earlier, because I think we could just have Dom in a room and he would be an example of what intrinsic engagement with games looks like. Now, this statement I made earlier, games are the most engaging medium of all time, that's quite a bold statement, so I better back that up with some facts. And thanks to Robin as well, who expanded on this point, and I'm just going to give just a couple of little factoids here. So in 2017, mobile games alone accounted for more revenue than any other form of entertainment, generating over $40 billion worldwide. And in that same year, People spent more money on all types of games, like PC games and consoles and streaming and so on, than they did on movies and music combined, at an estimated revenue of $92 billion US. And I really like showing this slide to people, because when I say to people that from an academic perspective, games are the most engaging medium of all time, I get also, oh, well, but what, blah, blah, blah. The moment I like show them the money, they're like, oh, really? Oh my God, that's incredible. But why are games so big? What is happening? Okay, and it's down to how we feel and what we do when we play games. Okay, because when we're intrinsically engaged, we increase our focus and attention. We increase our innovation abilities. And again, just going back to Dom, him being so incredibly innovative and problem solving the way he has done, creating those crazy beautiful Excel files, because he's intrinsically engaged with the games that he's playing. He's focused, he's attentive. When we're intrinsically engaged, we also have a desire to continue and complete the task at hand. Now, I've put at the bottom here all obvious benefits for market research, but all obvious benefits for almost anything you want people to do on the planet, right? You want to intrinsically engage them. But let's not forget, of course, that we play games, and play also has lots of other benefits. Again, not just for market research, but for lots of other disciplines and industries. When we play, we harness our imagination. Play allows us to explore a different self and our future selves in different scenarios. We're allowed to try out new concepts and things and roles without a threat to our physical or emotional well-being. And we're allowed to find and express our own core truths. Now, surely this is what we want in any business, in any interaction that we have with people, in and outside of market research, which is where I firmly sit. But also, let's not forget that games are essentially simulated experiences. Okay, and simulations again have lots of benefits in industry. When we simulate an experience, it helps us understand the why behind the what. We don't just see what people do, we look at the entire context. Why has somebody done that thing in this simulation? We're seeing some of the emotions that are being evoked, we're seeing some of the setup that the person's surrounding it. It gives us more of a holistic view of the reasons behind certain decisions. Watching how somebody behaves in a simulation allows us to ask less questions and just simply observe what they do and how they behave in context. And that data that we collect from these kind of simulations, in all sorts of industries, helps us do juicy things with predictive modelling. So we can, okay, in this simulation where something was priced at £5, this is what people did, versus when it was priced at £10. Or in the medical industry, if there's some time pressure, this is how people will behave, versus if there's no time pressure. So simulations are also very beneficial as well. Now, Dom shared a beautiful example of what intrinsic engagement with games look like. I cannot hope to top that, but I will just try to give you a few different examples, okay, that defy what we think we know about what humans are capable of doing. Okay, so first of all, just to follow on from Robin's misconception thing, in my book I have a whole chapter about misconceptions in games, because I often talk to old white male market researchers who have never played games and they just don't get it. And so when I show them that actually games are so intrinsically engaging, CEOs play them who are, known to be quite time poor people, and they're like, oh wow, that's fascinating. But of course, the intrinsic engagement we have with games has created a beautiful tapestry that is game culture, okay? And so just some screen grabs here. People, even when they put down the controller, will go and spend their hard-earned cash on magazines about games. They will read about games on blog sites like Kotaku and GameSkinny. They will spend hours producing beautiful works of fan art. They will dress up, cosplay, right? Costume play. They will take time and effort to buy costumes or make them and go to conventions and spend more of their time and money to walk around as these characters and meet other people. They will also do things like watching watching other people play games, which, as you may or may not know, has become a form of entertainment in itself. Now, these are funky wings down there. I want to talk to you about those for a minute. I got to interview this guy. He calls himself Elmin's Cosplay, so Elmin's Costume Play. I got to interview him for my book, and he defies, as Dom does, as lots of players do, he defies what we think human beings will do. Okay, so in market research, for example, we're constantly told people do not want to spend a long time taking part in surveys. In other industries, people don't want to spend a long time doing training. People don't want to spend a long time interacting with your marketing campaign, whatever it is, okay? And here is someone, because he's intrinsically engaged with the game League of Legends, spent over $1,000 and 1,000 hours of his time making these LED, beautiful mechanical wings. And this is a man from simple means, you know, just like you and I, pretty average Joe kind of guy. You know, you can see that he's just done this in his living room, but look at the beauty that he's been able to produce because he was intrinsically engaged. Another thing we're told in market research, and again, all other industries, education, training, marketing and so on, don't have a lot of text on your screen. People are not going to read it, okay? And yet, World of Warcraft, do you know how long I have spent reading the lengthy quests just to know what I need to do next? Or, as per this screen grab from That Dragon Cancer, so I'm really glad that got mentioned earlier today, this is one of about 15 letters that you find in a bottle. Okay, I won't go into detail about what the letter's about because I don't want you all leaving here in tears. It's an incredibly sad, yet uplifting actually game, but you're reading all these letters, and actually you have text adventure games, right, like Zork, where all you are doing is reading. Okay, again, it comes down to that intrinsic engagement. And again, in market research, training, education, marketing, tons of industries, we're told, oh, people don't want to write, people don't want to create. Okay, we're too lazy to do that. And yet, the World of Warcraft wiki has over 100,000 pages written by normal human beings who have taken, again, their time, their average. These are not rich people who can just sit around. They're just normal people doing 9-to-5 jobs or 2 jobs or 3 jobs like you and I, and they spend their time doing this because they're intrinsically engaged. So what does this tell us? This tells us when people are intrinsically engaged, there is no limit to how much information they will want to absorb and retain, how much they will want to create, and how much they will want to collaborate. But I was interested in the why. Okay, so I'm such a big kid that I'm always saying, oh, yeah, but why, but why, but why? So part of my research was to understand what it is that sparks this intrinsic engagement with games. What is so magical about games that I wanted to understand? And it turns out it's just pretty much got to do with how we are all created. So no matter your ethnic background, your age, your gender, we all have these 4 human psychological needs. Okay, our needs for mastery, so knowing how well we're doing at something, our sense of relatedness, how we are related to and socialising with other human beings and where we are in the hierarchy and all that sort of thing, our sense of autonomy, so our free will essentially, and our sense of purpose, you know, goals in life and where am I going and knowing what the next step is. Now, whenever I speak to students about this, they say, but do all 4 matter? Yes, they do. And just as a little test to you, imagine you had a life where you were knowing how well you're doing, you've got a great sense of purpose, you've got a great sense of relatedness, but I took away all your autonomy, all your free will, you would soon find yourself in a life that felt quite shitty. Right, let's face it, okay? And equally, if I took away any of the other components, you would feel bad, low sense of well-being, potentially lead to depression. Okay, so all 4 of these things need to be connected together for us to feel good, for us to be engaged with life, okay? Now, games have what I call 4 game ingredients. So every single game that has ever been played, from Call of Duty to Monopoly to hide and seek, all have 4 game ingredients, the things that make a game a game. Okay, so feedback, systems, so that's leaderboards, XP points, even visual feedback, audio visual feedback and so on. Goals in a game, rules and autonomy opportunities. Okay, so I decide when Super Mario jumps, falls off a cliff, and so on. Now, when I put my two graphs side by side, I had this eureka moment because, oh my God, it's the ingredients in the game that satisfy our human psychological needs. Okay, and what's so great about that is that you could almost kind of, if you were to overlap them, but okay, well, goals in a game clearly, satisfy a human psychological need for purpose. Autonomy opportunities, well, that's an obvious one. That satisfies our human psychological need for autonomy. But then you've got rules and feedback, and those satisfy our understanding of how well we're doing in a game, so our mastery and our relatedness as well. So where are we, for instance, on the leaderboard with others? How am I doing in this dungeon raid in World of Warcraft with my friends? Okay, so the very things that make a game satisfy our psychological needs. And when our psychological needs are satisfied, one of our 4 happiness chemicals called dopamine is released. Now, too much dopamine is a bad thing, and that's what leads to addiction. But in small doses, it's healthy, it does good, because when dopamine is released in our brains, we are more motivated, our memory improves, and we are more attentive as well. So again, lots of other industries, right, would benefit from that. And so I have used this information for 9 years to develop these research games that I make for all sorts of different brands and academic institutions. And I'll just run you through one just to give you a flavour of what they can be like. Now, all of the games look very different. So some look very 3D and very kind of hyper-real graphics. Some look kind of more stripped down and minimalist kind of lo-fi graphics. But this is an example of one that we did for a fashion brand called Lucy that are based in America. I didn't know who they were until they got in contact with me, because I don't really exercise, but it was all about what women want from their athleisure wear bottoms, okay? So you are a designer for the day and you make different decisions about your pants. So do you want them high-rise, mid-rise, or Britney Spears low-rise? You choose the shape, you choose the style, you choose the texture, you choose how many pockets you want. This game gave participants over 1 trillion combinations. Now, had it been a traditional survey, probably would have been very long. Certainly not maybe as visual, but obviously that's my choice to make a game visual. Games don't always have to be visual, of course. And so this was great for the client because they could visually see what people were making, not just because it was made in this way, but because participants were then sharing the summary of what they had created, which was lovely as well, and getting a price. So depending on what they chose and the style of pockets and so on, they get a price. And we're asking questions around, well, would you buy it, would you not, and why did you make that decision, and so on. Now, as we see lots from our research games, people say that they had a good time, it was engaging. Actually, the most frequently used term in terms of the feedback that we get is thank you. I think people are just so grateful it's not another boring survey. And we get lots of people saying that they will play a research game again. So that's all very positive, and participants always wax lyrical, and yeah, all that's really good. Clients are able to take the findings, put them into product development. So whether it's a fashion, or we've worked with Campbell's Soup and they've developed new products, or with Accenture, doing something with employee engagement in human resources and so on. And clients love it because it means that the game facilitates this understanding that they can co-create with a consumer rather than make something and retrospectively kind of evidence their thinking, which a lot of brands do. I don't know if you're aware of that, but a lot of brands do that. But this means that these kind of research games, because they're very engaging and because they facilitate collaboration, can become kind of like business decision support tools. So obviously a fashion brand could use this before they design a collection to kind of see where people's preferences may lie. Now, I'm not the only one that knows about the power of games, and I've used that for my own means. Lots of other people do as well, to the point where 2 new industries have been born from the entertainment games industry. So we've got the serious games industry, which is where you've got fully fledged games, whether they're digital or board games or VR games or whatever the medium might be, that are for a serious purpose, for a commercial purpose, for example, or an academic purpose, but basically to solve a problem. And And then you've got gamification as an industry, where you get the more superficial elements of games like points and badges, what that are kind of added to or built in as part of what would not normally be a game. Now, these industries are growing and huge. The serious games market is set to be worth $9 million by the year 2023. I actually think that's very conservative. I think it's probably 3 times more than that. And the gamification industry is set to be worth over $11 billion by the year 2020. So they're both doing well. But what's interesting is that serious games and gamification, not only are they being used in a number of industries, but they're now crossing boundaries. And this is a really good example of crossing boundaries. So this is a game called Covert Fashion. Lots of people play this game, but I think it should be labelled as a serious game, because you are tasked to create your avatar, dress your avatar, but what you are dressing them in are real clothes available from real brands, okay, to the point where French Connection, and I don't know if anybody remembers the FC UK marketing campaign from the 90s, they clearly don't have a problem with marketing, do they? They know what they're doing, okay, and yet they have said that this game has been the top source of all their e-commerce sales, okay. So we've got here a game that's a sales tool and a brand awareness tool, and picking up data based on what people choose. So the avatar picking up on micro trends and larger trends. So this is now crossing several boundaries. This is not a game anymore. This is a sales tool, a marketing tool, a branding tool, an awareness tool, a tool to understand more about consumers, because of course that data flows 2 ways. And I was like, man, that's the kind of thing I was creating with the fashion people, you know, and they just kind of beat me to it. But anyway, now, on the other side, games are starting to look more like surveys, because you've got more and more games now that are asking you to respond to questions, and from that you are redirected to different scenarios or situations or whatever it may be, or conversations based on how you've responded. This is what I'm doing with research games, and I'm almost gutted that games are doing it now even more than what they used to. But of course this is nothing new. It feels more visual now, but this is what we did when we were playing text adventure games many years ago, if any of you ever played them or play them now, indeed. So these 2 screen grabs are from a game called Detroit. If you haven't played, please do. It's fantastic. And then, of course, the Telltale Game Studio, which sadly went under, which I'm really gutted about, did loads of these narrative-led games, and one of them was called The Wolf Among Us. And you can see here that my character, well, I can choose if I go to somebody's office, somebody's apartment or a bar, I can choose how I respond in conversations. And basically, these games are sitting on survey logic, right? So in the background of the surveys you take online, you have this survey logic where, depending on what you press, you get a redirect to a specific question that relates to the answer that you wrote before. It's based on survey logic. So you've got this crazy, interesting merger where games are becoming more like surveys, and surveys are becoming more like games, and serious games are becoming sales tool, and it's all just becoming this really interesting kind of hodgepodge of games and data, essentially. Now, to give you a couple more examples, this is a VR game created by a company called Osso, and they're specialising in healthcare games. So trainee surgeons perform surgery on avatars within a game and see how well they're doing, essentially, before they're released into the real world. And the trainee surgeons who have played this game have or the people that oversee and the trainers have seen over 30% less errors being made and a 27% increase in speed. That's fantastic. I mean, I know those aren't huge numbers, but can you imagine if every trainee surgeon in the world played this game, what kind of impact those numbers would have over millions of people having surgery? There's also the Fluby game, created by a friend of mine called Andy Yeoman. He owns a company called Focus Games that traditionally do board games for the NHS and other healthcare organisations. But this one was called the Fluby game, really trying to put people in situations where they understood more about vaccinations. And as such, students who played this game that had what they call vaccine hesitancy changed their mind. 84% changed their minds after playing the Fluby game. And in one particular hospital, the vaccination rate went from 39% to 71% at the James Paget Hospital in London. Games are also being used to help treat stroke victims. I heard recently that Tetris is being used to treat lazy eye. Games are also being used with patients that are very young to help them articulate how to articulate the pain that they're in, or make them realise the importance of the kind of medication that they're taking. I haven't got a screen grab of it, but look at games like Remission 1 and 2. They have been built for children who have cancer to allow them to understand the importance of taking their medication. You've got games like Dumb Ways to Die that was developed by McCann Melbourne, which is an advertising agency for the Melbourne train system in Australia. The game helped to reduce near misses around trains by 30%. You've got games like Corbin Run. And what was great about Corbin Run, just as a very quick aside, it was the first time that I'd seen a serious game being picked up by the mainstream media on Channel 4 News. There was this whole bit about it. A company called Games for the Many created it to help young people be more engaged and understand more about the Labour Party policies at the time. And yes, it was a bit tongue-in-cheek, and you're racing the Tory bus of lies, and you've got Boris, who, God, we did not know he was going to be our Prime Minister, but, you know, dangling from a plane and all sorts of funny stuff. But the point was to engage people, to engage young people with politics in a way that they understood, essentially. And, you know, while I have no idea, and there is no hardcore information on how that translated into quantities of people going out and voting and so on, there was 15,000 downloads in the first 3 hours of its release. So these might be people who aren't going to go on the Labour Party website, download the PDF about their policies, but this was a new, arguably much more engaging way to engage with those policies. You've got Code Academy, the gamification of learning how to code. You can see some badges there, point systems, progress bars. You can collaborate with other people. I've had to go on this. I was able to code enough to have the time shown, which was great. By the way, I am a game designer. I'm not a coder. It's very different. You've got gamified training programs that help you how to learn different languages, like Duolingo. Again, arguably much more engaging than sitting and just reading a book. But the key thing with all of these is the data. Is the data you can get back to help you understand more about your progress, again, feeding into that mastery. And we've got all of that on our phones now. So all of you will have step counters, fitness apps. You've also got loyalty cards. All of that is the gamification of buying stuff, moving around. Okay, and with loyalty cards, one of the reasons that they're free, of course, is because there's about 5,000 data points on all of us that these businesses are benefiting from. So the great thing about it is the data being collected and how that can give us that increased sense of mastery, because it helps us really accurately see our progress and how we're collaborating with others and how we're learning and so on. And my prediction is that games and gamification are really going to help save the high street and revive tired experiences. And to give you a couple of examples of that, anybody heard of Secret Cinema or been to one? Couple of hands there. So I went to the Back to the Future one. That was great. The Blade Runner one, though, was Secret Cinema on steroids. It was insane. The money and the detail that goes into this thing, it's worth the £80 ticket or whatever. But Secret Cinema is a game, okay? So you have secret quests. You can create an avatar. There's a whole narrative that you're being engaged with as well. There are rules. You can't kind of like knock down the fourth wall and, oh, hello, strobe lighting. You know, and kind of try to break the characters of people that work at Secret Cinema. So there's all this kind of playfulness and gameplay going on, and you've got loads of brands creating these experiences that are very game-like and playful to promote their products or services, to the point where agencies are now building up that offer those services to brands. So you've got a company called Sensational Brands who are helping General Mills promote their Cinnamon Toast Crunch product here with this kind of game-like and playful experience where there's these kind of pop-ups where you can kind of smell different things and touch and so on. So you'd be hard pushed actually to find an industry that hasn't been touched by gamification or serious games in some way, because everything can be gamified. But how does this affect us all? Well, we've got, if all industries are using these serious games of gamification to the benefits of more engagement, more productivity, more problem solving, everything will be better, yeah! But what's going on with our data? Now, these organisations do not have to do what I do, which is abide by the market research codes of conduct. I'm a market research company, I make games, I have to abide by those rules, even though my output is not a traditional survey, but it is a game. These other organisations don't. Should there be new ethical guidelines in how we design these serious games and how we translate and articulate what is being done with our data? Now, the answer to that question is yes. And if anybody's interested in knowing more about that, I'd be delighted to have a conversation with you about producing more ethical guidelines for design and execution for serious games. But what's going on with our data? Every time I look at the terms and conditions, because that's how much of a geek I am, for all of these different serious games and gamified platforms, there is no, I mean, if you're in the UK and other European countries, yes, you have to abide by GDPR, but otherwise, there is no kind of code of conduct or industry code that you have to abide by to be transparent in how you're collecting that data, what's being done with it. Is that data being useful to some business somewhere to help them make business decisions? When you're playing a game like Dumb Ways to Die, does that help Melbourne trains in some way? Who knows? It's not as clear as I'd like it to be. So there's a lot of work to be done there from the data side. So thank you for coming to my talk. If you want to know more about all this kind of stuff, I have a column called How Games and Data Are Changing the World with a magazine called Research World, which is really catchy. And every column I will focus on a different thing. So games and gamification in marketing, games and gamification in finance, games and gamification in education. So please do have a look at that if you'd like. And yeah, happy to answer any questions you might have.